Well, hi everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. It is 2 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with my intro. My name is Laura De Palma. I am the marketing manager here at Renew International, and I'm very excited to be facilitating this webinar all about the Jubilee year today. I'm joined by Sister Janet Schaeffler, OP, as well as Deacon Charles Paulino. Sister Janet has worked with Renew for many years as a member of the pastoral services team, and she also continues the ministry that she was involved in, both in parishes and as the director for faith formation for the Archdiocese of Detroit. She has authored hundreds of articles and books. She leads retreats, missions, workshops nationwide and in Canada. She facilitates online courses for the University of Dayton and for Boston College, and she serves as an elected member of the executive committee of the board of the National Community of Catechetical Leaders. So she is absolutely a total slacker, Sister Janet, but thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled that you could be here today. Um, and Deacon Charles Parolino is the managing editor here at Renew International and the author of our own resource all about the Jubilee year. Thank you for being with us today. And before we get started, I would just like to cover a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions or comments, any technical difficulties, you need help with anything during the whole webinar, you can always reach me in the chat box or using the Q&A box, which is in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen for most of you. There will also be time for discussion at the end. So if you have any questions that you want us to address, any comments that you'd like to share, definitely feel free to share them again in the chat box or the Q&A box, and we will address as many as we possibly can. We love having everyone involved and making it interactive, so definitely share your thoughts with us. This session is also being recorded for anyone who couldn't join us today or anyone who may want to watch it again, or if any of you love it so much that you want to share it with other people in your parish or your small group. So definitely keep an eye out in your email. In the next few days, you'll get a link so that you can watch it anytime. And that's everything I have for you. So if you need any assistance, once again, or you have any questions or comments, you can send me a message in the chat box or the Q&A box. Otherwise, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck and Sister Janet. Take it away.
The concept of the Holy Year originated in God's instructions to Moses as recorded in the book of Leviticus, which was written hundreds of years, of course, before the birth of Jesus. God decreed through Moses that the Israelites should observe every 50th year as a Jubilee. The church has also used the term Holy Year. The instructions in the book of Leviticus, like a lot of things that we find in the Old Testament, were very complicated, but they included and emphasized forgiveness of debts and freedom for slaves and for prisoners. The overall theme was God's mercy and mankind's obligation to imitate it by being merciful to each other. There is a verse from that passage in Leviticus that is actually engraved on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. Proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. This tradition was revived in the Christian church in the year 1300 when Pope Boniface VIII declared a holy year. And since then, there have been many so-called ordinary jubilees every 25 or 50 years, and some extraordinary jubilees in odd-numbered years for specific themes or specific needs of those times. Whenever it is held, the Jubilee is always meant to be a year of forgiveness of sins and also of the punishment due to sins. A year of reconciliation between people who have been at odds. A year of conversion. It's a year in which people are encouraged to celebrate the sacrament of reconciliation. Ultimately, it is a year of justice, of hope, of a renewed commitment to serve God by serving our brothers and sisters. The theme of this Jubilee, or this Holy Year, proclaimed by Pope Francis, is Pilgrims of Hope. The term pilgrim is meant in a literal way because during this year, tens of thousands of Christians will travel to Rome and will pass through the holy doors of St. Peter's Basilica and 3 other basilicas within the city, plus for this year, for this Jubilee, in a prison. The doors, which were sealed in anticipation of the Jubilee and then opened by the Pope just at the end of last year, represent Christ as the door that leads to our salvation. Holy Year pilgrims may also visit any of several other designated basilicas in Rome and in the Holy Land, and indulgences have been granted for those who make those journeys. But the Jubilee isn't intended only for folks who can travel to Rome or to the Near East. And individual dioceses and individual parishes have scheduled their own local opportunities to observe the Holy Year. As one opportunity to do that, Renew International has created a new resource as a way for small Christian communities to enter into the spirit of this Holy Year. And Sister Janet is here to talk about when and how you may observe this occasion.
Thanks, Chuck. So let's look at 10 ways to celebrate the Jubilee year. And these are only a beginning. You can certainly think of other ways as you think more about the themes of what a Jubilee year is and what hope calls us to in today's world. So first of all would be to read the Jubilee document. As most things that Pope Francis has written, it's easy to read. So in there, Pope Francis talks about some of his thoughts about hope, as well as what he sees as the challenges of today, and then ways to celebrate the whole year. As Chuck said, one of the prime ways that many people celebrate the Jubilee year is to travel to Rome and pray at the holy sites. That's probably not realistic for most of us. So again, as Chuck just mentioned, many dioceses have designated particular parishes or holy sites to serve as the sites for pilgrimage during this year. Pope Francis said, setting out on a journey is associated with our human quest for meaning in life. A pilgrimage is a great aid for rediscovering the value of silence and simplicity of life. So you might want to think about, in addition to the designated sites in your diocese, where's a holy site for you? It might be the parish of your baptism. It might be a special place where you find it easy to pray. And that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a church either. Another thing that I think would be helpful is to remember that our lives are a pilgrimage. Our lives are a journey. And so we might want to think about making a retreat this year. Parishes might think about offering several retreats throughout the year for different groups with the theme of reflecting on the pilgrimage of our life so far. What's happened? What are we grateful for? Where was God with us in those times? And also planning our pilgrimage, our journey that's ahead of us for the next years of our lives. Another idea is to visit your cathedral. Cathedrals are where diocesan bishops opened the Holy Year locally on the 29th of December. And they will also be where the bishops will close the Holy Year on December 28th of this year. In the meantime, a lot of cathedrals, a lot of dioceses have planned specific events and remembrances and commemorations and activities that will happen there at the cathedral at the center of the diocese. For instance, the Diocese of Grand Rapids, Michigan, is planning 7 pilgrimages to their cathedral over the course of this year. And they're planning them for different groups, such as youth, parents and grandparents, Vietnamese communities, Hispanic communities, and a few others. So if your diocese is planning something at the cathedral or in the area, attend it, be part of it, make a pilgrimage there, as well as visiting the cathedral on your own, especially if you haven't been there in a while. As Chuck mentioned too, the theme of the reality of Jubilee years, holy years, is rooted in the Old Testament, where they would let their lands lay fallow, allowing for the soil to be replenished. Slaves were freed, land was returned to its original owners, and forgiveness happened of debts that couldn't be repaid. So the theme of forgiveness, reconciliation, right relationships has always been at the heart of all of the church's Jubilee years. So, in addition to the sacrament of reconciliation, might this be a year too of reflection on our lives and intentionally forgiving someone or asking for forgiveness? Maybe it's even of a relationship or a hurt from a long time ago that we thought maybe we forgot, but it still might be there. So how can we live forgiveness and reconciliation during this year? In the Jubilee document, Pope Francis asked Catholics to be tangible signs of hope for those of our brothers and sisters who experience hardships of any kind. And he specifically mentions prisoners. He also reminds us that signs of hope are needed today by the sick, by the young, by migrants, the elderly, and the poor. So how might we, during this Jubilee year, pay special attention to the corporal works of mercy, both as individuals, or if we belong to a small faith-sharing group, or within our parish, to do things together as a community that are works of mercy? Use too the resources that are available. In addition to the document from Pope Francis, the Vatican, the US bishops, and many dioceses have a great deal of resources on their websites that have information about the Jubilee year and different celebrations or different things to do. The Vatican website also has a video of a choir that performs Pilgrims of Hope, which is the official Jubilee hymn for this year. Another thing we can do is to practice hope. Pope Francis believes that this Jubilee year can offer hope for the church, the world, and each one of us. And hope isn't just something that we have, but I think hope is also something that we do. So how are we people of hope for others? And it might be in simple ways, in the words we say, in our attitude toward life and the happenings around us. So practice hope, because we're rooted in God's promises. How can we be people of hope for others? And ninth is to pray the Jubilee prayer. Pope Francis has written a specific prayer for this year. And at 139 words, it's easily incorporated into the daily prayers of individuals, families, parishes. And then, as Chuck mentioned at the end of his section, is to join others in a small group in sharing your faith, in sharing your everyday life about hope. And so Chuck will tell us a little bit more about what's included in this resource.
Yeah, thank you, Sister. So when Pope Francis declared this Holy Year, he did strike certain themes that have been important to him throughout his papacy. And so we've focused on several of them in this resource. There are 6 sessions. The first session, which is entitled Plenty of Plenty, encourages us to resist the attraction, the lure of materialism and consumerism. Instead of accumulating as much wealth and as many possessions, as many things as we can, the gospel calls us to think first of those who have less than we do, who have less than they need, and to do our part to assist them. The second session, which is called I See You, encourages us to pay attention to folks who might otherwise be forgotten and neglected, to take steps to make sure that those who are elderly, homebound, physically frail, confined to care facilities, that these are not cut off from the community, but are made to feel valued and loved. The third session is called Jesus Loved Him, calls on us to be witnesses, especially to young people who have never fully embraced the faith or who have drifted away. This session poses the question, how might a young person, by observing us, see Christ at work in the world and be attracted to join in that mission? The fourth session is called Out of Sight. This calls our attention to people who are in prison, a population that is really most dear to Pope Francis. When he declared the Holy Year, Francis wrote, "Let us think of our brothers and sisters in prison and think of God's tenderness for them. And let us pray for them so that they might find that window of hope, a way toward a better life." The fifth session is called Our Business. And this asks us to welcome foreigners, including refugees, and to treat folks of all ethnic and national and religious backgrounds as what they are, children of God, and therefore our brothers and sisters. And the sixth session, called Not to Condemn, calls us to remember that God is generous in forgiving our sins, and that we should imitate that generosity by forgiving any grievance or any grudge we might have against others, as Sister mentioned in her presentation. Every session includes passages from Scripture, opportunities for reflection and faith sharing, and examples of actions that we can take to share in the spirit and the mission of the Jubilee. And Sister Janet will explain when and how you can use this resource from Renew.
Thanks, Chuck. So let's look at some questions, some suggestions about using this resource. First of all, let's look at a couple ways that we might get ready for it. We might advertise it. One way is you might want to have a parish gathering, a one-time gathering, invite people just one time to this gathering with, of course, food. Begin with prayer, share some background about what a Jubilee year is, and then hopefully it's a large group. So divide them into small groups, groups of 7 or 8 people, and use the first session from the resource. So the background that's listed there, as well as the face sharing questions. And then when the groups are done, is calling everyone back together again, and maybe take some ideas that were surfaced in the small groups and end with prayer. And then, of course, invite them to continue this, invite them to form a small group in their home or other places, and we'll talk about that in a second. Here's another idea to build interest. I know a parish who, a few years ago, what they were doing for Lent, they had chosen one book, and they were inviting all parishioners to read the book and then be in small groups to discuss it. And so they wanted to get people interested in that. And so what they did was, about 4 weeks before Lent, at every weekend liturgy, they had about 6 copies of the book. And they said, who would like to take this book for just this 1 week? You don't have to read the whole book. Just look through it, read parts that you might be interested in. Feel free to highlight, write notes, underline, but then bring it back next weekend. And so the following weekend, they all returned. And so at those liturgies, they said to people, are there 6 other people who would like to take the book now? And so the people who had brought the book back handed it over to another person, and they were given the same directions. Feel free to underline, highlight, write notes, but bring it back the following week. And so that went on for 4 or 5 weeks. What that did was it put that book in the hands of lots of people in the parish. They not only looked at the book and got some idea of what was in the book, but also saw other people's comments, questions, what was important to them. And so it heightened an interest, so that when they invited people to sign up for a small group during Lent to really delve into the book, there was a heightened interest because a lot of people had already tasted it. So those are a couple ways of advertising, getting ready for it. And so let's just look at some of these questions that we usually ask about how to use it. So who can use it? One idea you might want to do is to invite existing groups in the parish, ushers, catechists, parish councils, different committees that meet. What you might want to do, because the book is designed to be used like for about a 90-minute session. So you might want to shorten it, or you might want to spend 2 weeks on each of those chapters. But it's inviting the leadership of the parish to be a part of this. What about inviting those people who participated in the OCIA last year, who are now newly baptized and maybe miss all the gatherings that happened when they were in the OCIA? What about people who finished other opportunities? So if you've had other opportunities at the parish for adult faith formation or small group sharing, maybe the synod sharing, invite them as a follow-up to continue what they experienced in those times, to continue it using this resource. In reality, everyone can use it. I know parishes too that with resources like this have used it for their youth, for their high school youth, or their young adults. So look around. Everyone can use it, and what they're being invited to is for 6 weeks. They're not being invited to do something for the next 5 years. So where do these small groups happen? Really, all kinds of places. Many small groups happen in homes. People open their homes and invite others, or the parish groups people together and gives them a place to meet in their home, in one person's home. That provides, for a lot of people, that provides a very comfortable and safe situation. And many people enjoy that. You also might make the parish grounds available to groups who want to meet. So maybe some people want to meet but don't have a home, or there isn't a home that's conducive for this. So at various times, invite the small groups to meet in your parish facilities. Another way you might want to do it at the parish is similar to what I mentioned a few minutes ago about giving people a taste of it, is you might want to invite people together in a large group and begin as a large group, so that you begin with prayer and some background maybe on the theme that you're looking at this week. And then again, divide into small groups. And if you did this, like for all 6 sessions, my suggestion would be that you would keep those small groups relatively the same. Now, not everybody might be able to come every night, but to build a community and a comfortableness in sharing with one another, you might want to keep those small groups together. And then, of course, you come back together for a closing prayer. What about using the theology on tap process, which just means where theology on tap meets? Theology on tap meets in restaurants, coffee shops, bars, libraries. And so invite people to form small groups and meet in places like that, where they might be going or want to go once a week. So when should we use this resource? Lent certainly would be an optimal time, because a lot of people are looking for something to do. They're open to doing something during Lent. So would this be available as one of the Lenten opportunities, or the crucial Lenten opportunity for your parish as you celebrate with the whole church the Jubilee year? Summer might be a time too. A lot of times I hear people say that everything stops. Most things stop, most programming, most adult faith formation, most faith sharing groups stop during the summer. But why do we do that? Are we saying that our growth in our faith only happens 9 months out of the year? And in reality, there are a lot of people who their summer schedules are lighter than the other 9 months of the year. So some groups might want to meet during the summer. And again, every group doesn't have to meet at the same time. There might be some groups meeting during Lent, some groups meeting during summer. The reality too is that look at the whole calendar. We've got a whole year to celebrate, to reflect on the themes of this Jubilee year. So what are the opportune times for your community? And lastly, what comes next? Well, hopefully, after using this resource and after having gathered in a small faith-sharing group, people have had a good experience. And so invite them to peruse the questions. Would our group like to stay together? And what would we like to use next? So Laura will tell us more about how to get this resource and some other resources.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So as you can see on the screen, we have a QR code and a link to the Jubilee book. I'll leave it up for a minute or two so that people have a minute to scan it, and then maybe we can take it down just during the Q&A so we can have a more natural discussion. While we have it up for a minute, I will add, Sister Janet, as far as your when to use it, that's something we've heard back from a couple of parishes, is that they're looking to use it during the Easter season. They say a lot of them have a Lent resource that they like to use, and they have a lot of Lenten groups formed. And they always say at the end of Lent, people are always like, what are we going to do next? What now? And this is what they've decided. They said, okay, so we're going to do what we do for Lent every year. And then after that, when people are already in the habit of coming and they're looking for something to do and participate, they're going to jump right into the Jubilee year. So like you said, you can use it anytime. I'm just sharing in case anyone's inspired by using it during Easter.
And that's a great idea, Laura, because I've always said Lent is 40 days long, and we do all these things during Lent. Easter is 50 days long,
Right.
and a lot of times what happens is everything stops. We do all this during Lent, and then we go into this wonderful season of the year, but we don't offer opportunities for people to continue. And
Right.
and that's the root of our faith. So great idea. Thank you.
I wish I could take credit for it, but that's just feedback that we've heard. But I thought I'd share it in case it inspires anyone. So we do have a couple of questions and comments from the people that have been watching. One person said that they were particularly inspired by the idea of a parish retreat because it's something very local and within the community that's accessible to people. And they were wondering if you had any suggestions, partly for themes, but also for structure, timing, anything like that. Any suggestions about making a parish retreat the best that it can be?
When I suggested that, one of the things I was thinking of was was a number of retreats or days of reflection during the year, and doing them for different groups, because a lot of times when we do things specifically for one group, more people will come. There's a saying by Seth Godin that says, a product for everyone rarely reaches anyone. But if you plan something for a specific group, like parents, um, you tend to get more people. So that's one way of doing it, is to do that. The other idea of doing a parish retreat, again, is a great idea. And there's lots of ways of doing it. I know parishes that do it like whenever they choose, Lenten time, Easter time, whenever. And it's like 3 or 4 nights in a row. I know other parishes that have done Lenten retreats, and it's like, it can be like run for 3 or 4 weeks. So like the first week, there's a session on Monday night. The second week, there's a session on a Tuesday night. And the following week, a session on a Wednesday night. That way you're helping people be able to participate who maybe are never free on Monday night. Whereas if you scheduled everything like on 6 Mondays, some people aren't going to be able to do that. I would always say too, with a retreat, I mean, you want to certainly include prayer, but you might want to have someone, do some input, some background, some ideas, but also there needs to be lots of time for small group sharing, even within the retreat, because that's the way that our faith, I believe, really grows, is when we share our faith and listen to others' experiences of God. Not that our experience of God is going to be the same as theirs, but listening to another's helps us to understand, to deepen, and to grow. As far as themes too, what I was thinking of, because of this whole idea of pilgrimage, is helping people to review their past life. What were the high points? What were the low points? Where was God? A lot of times when we're living through something, we don't realize how God is with us. But when we take time afterwards to reflect, we see where God was. And so, with the theme of pilgrimage, and then that could be part of the retreat, and then the other part could be looking forward. So what am I being called to during these coming years, no matter what my age is? What are my gifts? Because of my experiences in the past, what is God calling me to do in the future?
Thank you so much. There were so many ideas packed into that answer. We have another question that just came in. I've heard so much about pilgrimage, prayer, and reconciliation, but have been searching for more on works of mercy. That's it. That was the question. I guess we're wondering if there are any ideas about works for mercy, anything that we can do with that.
Did you have a thought?
Well, I think where mercy, I guess, would most obviously come into play would be with respect to those who are in prison. People who have been, sentenced to prison are, they're not in prison because they're in prison because they committed a crime, obviously. And we expect that when someone commits a crime, that there's going to be a penalty and that they'll serve that penalty. But that doesn't mean giving up on them. And unfortunately, as we discussed in this resource, very often the prison system itself, even though it's called a correction system, is not really geared for correcting anything. And people who are incarcerated will very often feel forgotten, isolated, and that only tends to make matters worse for them. Whereas if they're shown mercy, which could be by very simple things. For example, there are ways that you can arrange for instance, a pen pal with a person in prison, exchanging letters. Just that simple thing helps to make that person realize that somebody still cares about him or her, that this is not the end of their life, that they still have the potential of any human being to pick up and start anew, which is the central theme of our faith. And so I think that's where mercy most obviously comes into play.
That as I've looked at the resource, I think that the suggestions for action in each of those 6 sessions are works of mercy, are showing mercy, compassion to others. And my experience of facilitating small faith sharing groups is there could be in a resource ideas given of something you might do. But I find that the people in their sharing can start brainstorming all kinds of other ones. I also think maybe in addition to the resource, we all learned the corporal works of mercy when we were in school, but how many times do we look at them and reflect on them again? So maybe in a parish, that could be something that can start with the parish council, is looking at those corporal works of mercy and asking, how are we as a parish living these corporal works of mercy? And start listing what you're already doing. And probably too, you'll realize that you're doing a lot that you never maybe stopped to think about. But then the question always is given today's challenges, given today's circumstances, what are we being asked to do today? And again, brainstorm ways that individuals and the parish as a whole can can live the corporal works of mercy. The other thing too that I just thought of, when you look at the corporal works of mercy of feeding the hungry, visiting the sick, clothing the naked, visiting prisoners, burying the dead, there are all kinds of organizations in our communities that do some of those things. So why not have a fair some weekend and invite all these groups to come and exhibit what it is that they're doing so that people get to know all the resources that are in the community, as well as how they can be a part of them, how they can be, how they can join with that group or do something that that group would suggest. So again, I think it's looking at certainly what we're already doing, but given today's world, given today's needs, what else am I being called to do?
And I think she clarified a little bit if there are any specific suggestions within the document, I think for the Jubilee year, that is encouragements to pursue corporal works of mercy. I think the prisoners is a lot in the forefront of a lot, both the Jubilee document and a lot of what Pope Francis talks about. It is a cause near and dear to his heart. But is there anything in the document that she can point to really guide people towards the corporal works of mercy, towards really making a difference in the world around them?
You have to go back and look at the document. I don't know right off the top of my head. Chuck might know.
No, I don't immediately. But I do think that the word mercy can extend to, for example, if you have a population within your, in your community that might be feeling isolated, that might be feeling rejected. Why? Because of their ethnicity or because of their religion. One way to show mercy is to demonstrate to those people that they are not, that they have friends who are not like them. For instance, some years ago, I invited a Muslim woman to speak at our parish, and she came with her two teenage daughters. And they were so touched by the fact that somebody, rather than looking down on them or being afraid of them or ridiculing them, whatever experiences that Muslim people frequently have, instead were reaching out in friendship to them and trying to understand them. It doesn't mean that you're compromising your faith. It just means that you realize that these are human beings and they're children of God and they're our brothers and sisters. And that can make a big difference in a person's life who might be feeling otherwise that people look askance at them because of the way they dress or because of their name or because of their religion. And I think the same thing is true, for example, of you might have Latino people who live in your community, but who don't have any grounding there. They're new. They might be living there because it happens to be where their jobs are and so forth. And then there's a language issue. If you're reaching out to people like that, can make a big difference in their lives and make them realize that they're not alone in the community. And that's a merciful thing to do.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Those were great ideas. We have another comment from Suzanne, she's organizing a pilgrimage in her diocese to the co-cathedral. There will be a special tour of the co-cathedral and opportunities to stay for Sunday Mass, all honoring the Jubilee year. And to enhance the experience, she has designed a prayer card featuring the Jubilee prayer. But she's wondering if there are any other free handouts, resources, anything that you could recommend that could be shared either with the volunteers who are helping her organize it or with the pilgrims who are taking part in the pilgrimage. Do you have any? I did send her a link to the Jubilee website, which I'm sure she's already found if she designed a prayer card with the Jubilee prayer. But do you have any ideas of free or extremely low cost materials that she could use for her endeavors?
I do not.
Yeah, I don't either, Laura. what I would just say is to check, the USCCB website.
Oh,
And
that's a good idea.
because I know there are a number of things there, whether they're exactly what she's looking for, whether they're, um, handouts, but maybe you could make them into a handout too.
Mhm.
But I would check your own diocesan website, but then also Google some other diocesan websites.
Mhm.
There are some dioceses that are always more proactive in situations like this, and so have a wealth of information. And so just think of maybe some of the major archdioceses and check what's available.
Okay, those are great ideas to explore the USCCB and don't be afraid to borrow what other dioceses might have already developed. I'm sure they'll encourage it because their purpose is to get people involved. Catholic Church
Exactly.
doesn't look for credit for these things. Um, let's see. We have another comment. Thank you for the sharing. Just a comment. I was very inspired by the various themes and groups of persons. It confirms what we have been planning to do, to intentionally identify the various groups in our parish by age groups and professions, pray for them, and have a gathering for them every month. For example, we started this January with the councils and committees. Next month, we'll be praying for and celebrating the youths and couples of the parish. I love that idea. So they kind of rotate it to draw in different groups in their congregation. That's a really great idea. And I'm going to go ahead to the next question. This comes in from a teacher, someone who works with elementary school kids about ages 8 to 10. And she's wondering how to explain the Jubilee to them. And are there any things that are age appropriate and school friendly that she could get them involved with in school? So how do you tell a kid about the Jubilee year, and how do you come up with a project or something, some way for them to feel involved and understand what's happening in the church?
You know, um, in the chat, Bonnie just said to check some of the publishers. RCL has a resource of Doors for the Jubilee.
Mhm.
I think Sadlier has has resources on their website too.
Okay.
So check some of the um I think many of the themes of the the Jubilee year, forgiveness, reconciling with one another,
Mhm.
um, works of mercy, compassion. I mean, children can understand that, and we need to be starting with them. Um, so so even some things that are already in the textbooks can be adapted. But I would check all those, the major publishers, like Loyola Press, RCL, Stadlier, our Sunday Visitor, um, are some of the major publishers of
Okay.
resources and textbooks for children and youth. And a lot of them have have specific things for the Jubilee year.
That's great. And I actually just shared the link in the chat to the Doors resource that you were referring to and that Bonnie brought to our attention. It's a website and it's completely free. All you do is click on each door of hope. It has little images of doors. It's very colorful, and it comes up with an idea of how you can honor the Jubilee year during that month. So this website has some other free suggestions. It may have free resources, Suzanne, if there's anything that might be useful there. Um, for your pilgrimage to the co-cathedral, but it's pretty cool graphic design too. It's very colorful. So it has a lot more ideas. And of course, there's always things that you can do within your own parish, just bringing people together and really talking about it. Um, we have no other questions or comments. I'll linger for a minute in case, does anybody else have anything they'd like to write in? Again, in the chat or the Q&A box, you can reach us with any questions or thoughts that you might have. I love the ideas that people have been sharing in the chats. That's what we love about webinars, that it's not just our ideas, but that other people can share with each other. It's a great system, a great way to get ideas about how to do things. Anyway, thank you all so much for being here with us today. I hope you found this webinar to be useful and to help you honor the Jubilee year as we move forward. Thank you, Sister Janet and Deacon Charles, for all of your great presentation points and the ideas that you shared with us during the Q&A. I'm so grateful that you could be here with us today. I don't know about everybody else, but it's freezing where I am in the Northeast, so I hope everybody's staying warm. Um, I haven't seen any other questions come in, so I'll still linger for a minute or two in case anybody comes in. Let's see, we had one comment about a special plenary indulgence. Any thoughts about that? Is this a one-time? Yes, this is a one-time webinar about the Jubilee. But you all have my email address in your inboxes. It came with the Zoom link. So if you have any questions or comments, or you'd like to continue the conversation, definitely feel free to reach out to me. And Renew does host other webinars. In fact, we have one coming up. I think the next one is February 13th. And the topic of that one will be Love Thy Neighbor. And it's all about really bringing your parish community together. We know a big issue in the United States now is merging parishes and how to get those communities to really accept each other. So that's going to be another great webinar, and there might be a lot of themes that overlap with the Jubilee year. So definitely feel free to join us on February 13th for Love Thy Neighbor. And then the week after that, or it might be 2 weeks after that, we'll also be doing a Lenten series, all about bringing together small groups to honor Lent within your own community. So we have a lot of upcoming opportunities, and feel free to join us for any of those. Ada says she just heard about the Jubilee year, and how have the rest of us already completed so much planning? Ada, the Jubilee year has only been around for a couple of weeks so far. You have a whole year to catch up. Don't worry about it. In fact, if you're able to enact something during Easter or during the summer or even in the fall in your parish, it's not too late. There's always time to get started and get people involved in the Jubilee year. I think, let's see, we have one from Palma. The Shrine of St. Joseph in New Jersey, in Sterling, New Jersey, is a dedicated site for the Jubilee year, and they are hosting confession any day from 1:30 to 3:30. And they also have special events on their website. So for anyone in New Jersey or in the tri-state area, that might be an option for you, or to make a pilgrimage for your community to this Shrine of St. Joseph in Sterling, Stirling, in Sterling, New Jersey. So they're hosting some events right here in the United States. No need to fly across the ocean to Rome. That might be too much for some people. But thank you all again so much for being here, and most especially Sister Janet and Deacon Charles. We really, really appreciate all of your wonderful insights. I hope you all stay warm and have a wonderful rest of your day. I think that's everything we have. Again, keep an eye out in your emails for a recording of this webinar, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions you may have. And definitely join us on the 13th. We look forward to seeing you again. Have a great day.